Today we're going to chat about cholesterol and fat, and as I recovered from my eating disorder, I recognized the importance of dietary fat and cholesterol as I learned that I didn't have to be enemies with fat anymore. I began making more conscious decisions around fat in my diet, and these decisions were a part of what allowed me to release about 30 pounds of excess weight that my body was carrying around for so many years. And I know that there's a lot of controversy with weight and how it's managed within eating disorder recovery. In fact, when we're approaching recovery from a place of lack and needing to lose weight, it's actually not the best place to focus on that part of your health. So, one thing that I really enjoy doing for my own life and the approach that I take with my clients in health coaching is focusing on what can we add in to actually nurture the body towards a state of health instead of thinking about restrictive diets, restrictive calories, and restricting macronutrient groups. And fat is one of those macronutrient groups that a lot of times is neglected, especially as, we're raised in America. We have all of these fats around us, and we talk about fast food and how that can be damaging to the body, and saturated and transaturated fat get a lot of bad rap with heart health, and that's what we're going to uncover today. But it really comes down to how are you balancing your intake, and where are the sources of the fat that you're taking in coming from, and what is the chemical breakdown of these compounds once they enter the body, what is actually happening in there. And when we can add that layer of understanding to our daily life, it helps us to make decisions that are basically going to help build our health towards a better place, and a more complete picture is painted for us overall. So let's dive into what the modern science and research says. Harvard Medicine Journal says that cholesterol is needed to make vitamin D hormones, including testosterone and estrogen, and fat dissolving bile acids. So what that really means is cholesterol is created by the liver to help us be able to carry out day-to-day like life-sustaining functions like hormone production. We have to be able to transport vitamins to the tissues to support our organs like our brain and all the other tissues in our bodies. But we also need to dissolve the fats that we're done with. So the liver helps detoxify the body, and it helps break down fats that we don't need, and it can be dissolved into bile acids that are then excreted through the kidneys and then out in our elimination system. So the cholesterol production is important, and the intestines make about 80% of the cholesterol, and actually only 20% comes in through our diet, through the foods that we eat. And I thought that was so cool because when you really think about it from a 20% standpoint, things like having an egg every day, a lot of times, people see eggs as a source of cholesterol, and we've been told that that's not good. It can raise our risk for heart disease, but we have to dig a little bit deeper to discover the truth. Another important factor to keep in mind is obesity and cholesterol markers and blood pressure markers. All these parameters are created by pharmaceutical agencies and companies that need to have some sort of threshold for prescribing medications to treat something. I've seen repeated sickness and poor quality of life that medication without lifestyle change, this was never going to help anybody reach their ultimate recovery and healing journey. So cholesterol is important, but there are many conflicting points of view about it. And I'll start by talking about some of the different kinds of fats. And when we see inside the body at a microscopic level, lipids are broken down from the fat that we consume. So lipids and cholesterol molecules help take the nutrients throughout the body and help the body to do the necessary functions. So the liver converts these lipids from our food into cholesterol, and it can be delivered around the body to help with its various functions. Fats are helpful for absorbing minerals and vitamins like A, D, E, and K, and these help build hormones, support cell health, and the phospholipid barrier around the cells that each of our cells have. It's got a wall on the outside that's created out of phospholipids. Lipids are actually part of each of our cells' wall, and they help its integrity. So fat-soluble vitamins are dissolved and transported with fat. If fat-soluble vitamins are transported and absorbed in fat, what kind of functions do these vitamins have in the body? Vitamin K helps appropriate blood clotting, and A and E are important in hormone synthesis, healthy eyesight, and hair growth and retention of hair. And it's also important for skin health and cell regeneration, as we were highlighting with the fat. We need vitamins as well to help create a healthy cell layer and a defense system for our cells so they can stay intact. Vitamin D is the only vitamin that our body can produce with sunlight exposure, and it partners with vitamin K inside the body to support bone health and density as we age. So let's talk about the different kinds of fats. First, polyunsaturated fats and monounsaturated fats are the different kinds of unsaturated fats that help reduce bad cholesterol and help nurture your body to have a better level of HDL, which is the better cholesterol to help protect your vessels and your heart against heart disease. The reason that LDL has been given a bad label is because of the way that it behaves inside of the body. It is a very rich form of cholesterol once it's inside the bloodstream, and it's a more sticky substance that can actually aggregate and stick together inside and collect and form those plaques that we hear about. But one of the things that is so important to remember is when you are thinking about LDL congregating together, you have to remember that in order for it to be dangerous and harmful, you have to have some more inflammation going on that would cause that sticky plaque to also be involved in an inflammatory response with higher blood sugar and also inflammation going on with, any sort of cellular level of inflammation. So high blood sugar, when you have a higher concentration of sugar in the blood, it actually is sharp and it scrapes against the sides of the vessels, causing micro tears and causing an inflammatory response. We do want inflammation at a certain level in our body. We don't want to think that inflammation is bad, but when you kind of come to this place where inflammation is repeatedly happening and you're not nurturing your body towards that place of homeostasis where there's a balance of inflammation, and your body can't really repair itself, and there's just this constant harmful cycle going on with a high blood sugar and LDL, you basically are in the situation where it's easier to get heart disease, because then you're promoting inflammation and the body is sending these clotting factors and things to repair the damage that's happening, and all those things can kind of bundle up into a mess and cause a big plaque, and that can block your arteries. The heart has coronary arteries, and those are more narrow though than the bigger ones, but plaque can really collect anywhere. But it becomes really problematic when it starts to close off that pipeline and narrows the pipe down, so you're not getting that blood flow, and it's hardening the circumference of the vessels, so that can also be damaging to the body in other ways. Back to monounsaturated fats. The difference between polyunsaturated fats and monounsaturated fats is the chemical compound structure. So monounsaturated has one bond between the molecules, and the polyunsaturated has two bonds. Like I was mentioning, these can help you improve the ratio between LDL and HDL, and you basically can get monounsaturated fats from olives, peanuts, avocados, nuts, almonds, hazelnuts, and pecans, and pumpkin seeds. Examples of polyunsaturated fats are walnuts, flax seeds, and salmon, mackerel, and also compounds of omega-3 fatty acids. EPA is found in fish like tuna and salmon. EPA prevents blood from clotting easily, reducing the triglycerides in the blood and having a reducing effect of pain and swelling in the body. DHA also comes from omega-3 fatty acids, and it's found in fish as well. We often hear about omega-3s being heart protective, and fish is a good source of omega-3s, but you can also find it in algae. Sometimes there's heavy metals like mercury found in fish, and it's good to keep this in mind when you consider taking supplements and eating fish in your diet regularly. Heavy metals are natural to be found in the Earth's crust, and when weathering and erosion happens, inside nature, it goes into the water, and then it goes into the fish's gills as they swim, and it's absorbed into the fish, and then humans can eat that. And there's different levels of concentration of heavy metals, but ultimately I think it's better to consider this as you're balancing what kinds of foods you're eating. And Tony Robbins really was eating a lot of swordfish and mackerel, tuna, and he had heavy metal toxicity, mercury levels that were higher than his doctor had ever seen. I personally have been through heavy metal toxicity from something else, but it's really not a good, fun experience when you're going through that because you feel so fatigued and you feel like something's terribly wrong with you. It is, and you need to get the heavy metals out. But just something to keep in mind as you're examining what kinds of foods are good for you in your diet. So if you're wanting to get a supplement for omega-3s, you can get supplements from Nordic Naturals. I trust them as they test for heavy metals and things like that, and they also offer something that's friendly to vegans that are EPA and DHA omega-3s that come from algae. So I have tried that, but just being aware of what options are available for you is really helpful. Saturated fats encourage the liver to actually eliminate excess fat from the liver, which helps the liver to function more efficiently. And maybe you've heard of fatty liver disease, but that happens when there's a level of inflammation and the liver starts to store fat. It's not very well understood in the research. There's more research happening, but essentially what fatty liver disease is that is non-alcoholic is when somebody is accumulating fat in their liver that's not related to alcohol. But there are other things that can cause fat to be stored in the liver because the liver is our detoxification and helps filter out the fat that we don't need and helps break it down. It's filtering a lot of toxins out. So some of the more secretive and not much talked about ways that toxins can get in to your body and your liver is processing those as marijuana, regular marijuana use, things like cigarettes. Your liver has to deal with all of these things. Toxins, free radicals from the environment that end up in our bodies, our liver has to deal with this stuff. And if your liver is put under too much of a burden, then it can start to store fat and it can start to get scarring called cirrhosis. And that can actually affect you in many ways where you're not really sure what's going on. You can be dealing with a lot of weight that won't come off with all the right lifestyle changes. Liver health is so important. But saturated fats are really helpful for nurturing the liver to process fat in a healthy way. So saturated fat is really controversial because we've heard that it contributes to heart disease and increases our risk for that. But in a minute, I'll talk a little bit more about the controversy and the contrasting opinions and research to support that it actually is a healthy option for us. But the way that you can get saturated fat in your diet is looking for grass-fed, grass-finished beef products. You can get saturated fat through coconuts and grass-fed butter or ghee, which is clarified butter, and also full-fat cheese, milk, and heavy cream that comes from grass-fed sources as well. Side note on coconut oil being unhealthy. It's actually a health-minded choice to choose coconut oil because it contains a unique type of medium-chain triglyceride called lauric acid, which research has shown to raise HDL levels, which is the good and protective cholesterol levels in the body. So it may decrease the risk of heart disease after all. The controversy of saturated fats has been so interesting to me as I began the process of healing my own body, and I'll highlight a few points that I think you'll really like digging into this topic to help you decide for yourself what's the truth. When low saturated fat diets were studied in people, sometimes it helped them decrease the risk for heart disease, but we know now that heart disease is more complicated than that, and it does boil down to the type of fat and the quality of fat that you're consuming. There's also limitations to the studies that have been taken place. There's always limitations to research studies, but other things that can reduce the heart disease in your body and elevate your quality of health is improving stress level, improving your metabolic health and blood sugar balance, your gut health, and then paying attention to other genetic predispositions in cholesterol and heart disease that may be in your family line. It's also important to support the liver because this organ helps neutralize our toxins, as we were discussing earlier. So as it filters the harmful substances out to be excreted, it also converts compounds to be something that our body can use. So when you're decreasing saturated fats in your diet, what is actually happening when you're doing that is you're probably going to be finding yourself eating a lot more whole foods. And when you're eating foods that are not processed in nature, This is the best form of fuel that your body can do something with, because when processed down, it strips the food from the vitamins and the minerals that it originally has. So presenting your body with whole foods gives it the ability to start using the energy from its most pure source, and you're going to get pure energy from it, and it's going to help your body to detoxify. It's going to help your body form hormones and be able to use that food for the best. It will help decrease inflammation inside and balance your blood sugar when you're able to eat that way. And as we were discussing earlier, blood sugar is actually very important in our body's metabolic health. So when there's a higher concentration of blood sugar, it's very sharp against the vessel walls and can damage people's arteries and veins. That's why in diabetes, a lot of times people get numbness in their fingertips, because it damages the nerves and the blood supply in the capillaries, where blood has to turn around and go back to the heart. Each of these fingers, there's capillaries where only it's like the smallest blood vessel imaginable. Blood sugar going through those vessels can be very damaging to those small, tiny vessels. The second thing to keep in mind is when you're decreasing saturated fat, if somebody takes that into consideration and starts decreasing the amount of processed foods in the body, you're going to be seeing more things like avocado, nuts, seeds, and whole food animal products, and those foods are nurturing to the body, as we had discussed. It's also important to take a look at what is your perspective on the ways that animals are being raised, farmed, and distributed. Outside of ethical concerns, meat has been consumed by most populations throughout history, and vegetarians were pretty much vegetarians because they didn't have the access to meat. And so, in general, meat is not bad for you, but you have to pay attention to what quality is coming from the meat that you're consuming. What was that animal fed throughout its life? What kind of life did it have? Was it cooped up in a small space with poor ventilation? With conventional farm practices? Did it eat corn? Because corn is genetically modified too a lot of times. So you want to be making sure that your animals are being fed something living, something like grass, and they're grass finished as well, and local whenever possible. So what kind of fats are we supposed to decrease or avoid in our diet? Looking at the label is the most important part to figuring this out, because when you can look at the back label and distinguish what kind of fats are important to avoid, we want to start avoiding trans-saturated fats, which are primarily found in fast food and really common source, really processed foods, packaged foods, peanut butter like Jif, Skippy. These are hydrogenated. They've been hydrogenated through a process that adds hydrogen to the vegetable oil and converts the liquid into a solid at room temperature. And originally this was used to help increase the shelf life of these products, but these types of fats really should be kept to a minimum so we can decrease the amount of processed ingredients that are going inside of our bodies, because it's really not healthy for our liver to be processing that kind of fat, and it can be stored inside of our vessels and promote fatty liver disease along the way. So removing these types of fats from our daily life is really going to be a health-minded decision as you're looking towards orienting your lifestyle in down a better path. So how much fat should I really be eating, you might be wondering? Ultimately, what's going to decide this is your metabolic and your genetic makeup, what's your unique situation for your body at the time, and the state of your health. So if you're taking the example of a 2,000 calorie diet, generally speaking, about 25 to 35% of calories can come from fat, which looks like 44 to 77 grams. And there are times that I decide to track my fat grams because I like to learn more about my body and what makes me feel really good. And I've done that in the past to understand myself a lot better. And I do think that it's not right for everybody at every point, especially if you're struggling with an eating disorder or recovering from one. But ultimately, I really like to understand the science behind what's going in and what it makes me feel like, because I think when I have that understanding, I can make the best decisions for my body on a daily basis. And that's really what is important to me, is feeling my best as often as possible. And it's been a journey. Like the past 4 years has not been easy all the time. There's been times where I've struggled with mysterious things with my health, but I really do enjoy tracking once in a while just to kind of see where I'm at and what my appetite is and what my body is asking for energy wise. So, tips for choosing good kinds of fat to put into your diet every single day are looking for organic, grass fed, animal fats, dairy, and meat products. Plant fats are also very nutritious, and my favorite ones to use for cooking and in my recipes are extra virgin coconut and olive oil and avocado oil. Seed oils are best to be kept to a minimum because of the omega 6 ratio inside. There's evidence that having high omega 6 ratio compared to omega 3s actually stops the anti inflammatory effect of omega 3s in the body. So I like to kind of keep those to a minimum as I'm choosing my fats. Ultimately, when making a lifestyle change, one of the best things that you can do is visit an integrative medicine provider, and they can also do your labs there in addition to your Western medicine provider. The best cholesterol panel you can ask for when you go to visit your doctor is an NMR lipid panel to accompany your complete lipid profile. This one helps you understand the ratio of HDL to LDL. Even though it's not a completely conclusive picture of your cardiovascular health status, it is really helpful and a good place to start and a good lab to have when you are looking to measure your progress over the long term. So that's all for today. If you liked this episode or if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to this podcast and like this video. Give it a thumbs up and you will see this content coming at you every single week. Maybe you're looking to make a healthy lifestyle change and could use some more structured help with food, stress reduction, and movement, but you don't exactly know where to start. I'd love to sit down with you over the phone and talk about how I can help you reach that goal. And if you'd like to, there's a form you can fill out in the show notes of this episode.